Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours, our weekly show that we bring to you to answer marketing, communications, and design and all things about those things. And we come each week to share what we're learning and what we're talking about here at Shift, but also to answer your questions. I am Sarah Mayer. I'm a partner at Shift Collaborative, and with me is Cynthia Closkey, also a partner of Shift Collaborative.
Hi.
That was nice. So yeah, this is going to be our last episode of 2020 for Shift Office Hours. And we're kind of, retooling, revamping Office Hours as you might know it as our weekly show. We might be back in the future. We don't know. We might remix this for another edition. So stay tuned on that. But we're here for this last week of the 2020 Office Hours, and our plan today is to kind of go back in time and recap the different topics that we've covered. This is our 27th episode, so we've done 26 prior to this. So I sort of we grabbed the different things that, different topics that we thought were fun and interesting, and we thought we could kind of recap them. And if there's been any of late changes about some of those topics, we can bring you up to speed.
Yeah, I think it's fun to look back and to see what things we talked about, what's changed since, in the months, in the years, it feels like since this year started, or at least since the sort of lockdowns and pandemic took hold of us.
Yes. It does feel like a very long year for sure, and I know we're not alone in that sentiment, and I'm sure lots of folks are ready for it to be over.
Yeah. I think if anything, we've been super fortunate as a company and as individuals that we have not been as negatively affected as so many people right now. So I mean, this time of year, one typically looks back and looks for things to feel grateful for, and certainly we've got a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the news around small businesses really struggling at during this pandemic, having to let, employees go and having to even maybe shutter their doors. So we've been fortunate to not have either of those things be, something that we as a company have had to face. So
Right.
We've been very fortunate.
Right. And I think that's part of why we're wanting to do these office hours and leave them up online as resources for folks. And if there's useful tips and advice we can give, or ways for people to think about things or ideas, I hope that they'll be helpful.
Yes, I hope so too. All right. So ready to dig in and look back over the episodes?
Absolutely. Where do we start? Start at the very beginning? It's a very good place to start.
That is a good song. Yes. We had our very first episode on May 15th, which, there was no snow on the ground as there is today. It was a different time. The summer was just beginning. And we talked about, on that date, responsive websites and the importance of having a website that, can render well on any size device. That's a challenge. It's a challenge for lots of people.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the idea of different screen sizes, that's been around for a few years now, and the technologies for making sites responsive have been around for a while. But when you think about companies that don't necessarily live online, in other words, they don't have e-commerce, or they created a web presence, maybe, gosh, like around 2010 or so 10 years ago, but still, the latest techniques and things wasn't as, there's a lot more that the technology can do right now for letting you resize, and there's a lot of things you have to do to resize to be visible. I mean, we don't have to make your website readable on a watch yet, but pretty much all these other devices, different screen sizes and different ways of acting, all of that comes under this framework of responsive.
Right. And I think that a lot of times, companies may think that they have a responsive website because they perhaps invested in making their site mobile friendly, 8, 10 years ago. But like you say, the technology has really changed. And so their site might be technically, mobile friendly in that you don't have to like pinch and pull to see the content. But um, it might not be as mobile friendly as they think it is. And we've got a lot of different size devices these days, and that keeps changing. And, every time iPhone comes out or Apple comes out with a new iPhone, those, screen sizes can change. So you really have to keep on top of it, I guess is our point.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the way that people think about phones and tablets has changed as well. There was a point early in the world of trying to make things work on a smartphone where companies thought, well, I want a different experience on a mobile device than on a desktop. I mean, I said this many times. Think about what people are doing when they're on the phone. They're probably out and about, and they really just are trying to look things up. But that's not our world now at all. People are using these second and third screens all the time, maybe sitting at a TV watching something, and then maybe have their phone with them. So maybe they are trying to look up something and they need much more detail than maybe we would have guessed in the beginning. And so thinking about that has become, much more of a best practice, like assuming that we want to be able to do everything on the phone that we can on the desktop and maybe even more.
Yeah, I mean, this is why there's an entire, field of marketing and website design called, user experience. And, a lot of what we're looking at is, well, not just what is the device, but what is the behavior of the user and what do they need and what are they doing and what emotions are they feeling? There's just so much to consider. And that's why there's a whole study of it. There's a whole field to make sure that experiences are designed on the web for the end user.
Absolutely. There's another thing we talked about that week that was something that we have, I think, talked about several times. We talked about just last week, which was keeping your business information on the different sort of map directories, whether it's Google My Business, which comes up when you do any kind of like a local Google search, or on Bing, keeping those things updated. At the time in May, everyone, the major push was to put in what's your COVID situation? Are you open? Are you not? Can you deliver? Do you not? And at that time, I can't quite remember, but I think restaurants were starting to deliver, or things were starting. That this whole sort of curbside everything had started to really
contactless delivery or takeout. Yeah, all of these new terms.
Right. And so and keeping your Google My Business and being local and all of those other directories current really is provides the very first look that people will find about you when people do a search online. So always, I think that's recommendations we only would say even more right now. As the holidays are here, are you open? Are you not? Are your holiday hours different? And it's hard to keep everything updated with all of these changing laws and regulations and rules and restrictions. We're now in code red, we're now in code orange, we're now in code puce. I don't know what we're in, but those updates can be pretty quick and really just take you minutes. So it's worth doing, and it really is a great resource for your customers.
Yeah, and I think that Google in particular, at least from my experience, has been trying to do a good job at reminding people, hey, you need to go in and update, maybe your hour. Do you have different hours during COVID? And like in advance of the holiday, I feel like they always have sent an email to say, hey, maybe, like update your profile with the holiday hours. But, since the pandemic has started, they have consistently sent messages. I just happen to be a user or manager on like 10 different Google My Business profiles. And I get a lot of those reminders. And, I think that is really in an effort to make sure that people are using it. And it goes to sort of prove that if Google's emailing you about it, they're using it, they're putting the results in front of people. So they really want it to be the most up to date.
Absolutely. So remains good advice.
So that was the first episode. And we're not going to go episode by episode by any means. I think we just kind of pick and choose along the way here. But the next one that we pulled out was our June 12th episode. And in this episode, we talked about a thing that we've also talked about more than once. This was when it debuted, but Google Core Web Vitals. So this was the first episode that we started talking about it. And it had just kind of, the news of it had just sort of landed in May. And what that is, in case you're watching for the first time and are unsure of what we're talking about. So Google has rolled out these like sort of a new set of metrics for anybody that manages a website to be paying attention to. And these metrics are looking at experience. So page experience for the user. Does the site download fast? Are there a number of elements that maybe are doing weird things like, making the screen shake a little bit, or they're coming in at weird times and you're clicking a thing by accident? All of these kind of just sort of fall into the category of user experience, are now going to be a part of Google's search algorithm. So they will impact your rankings. And they made an announcement in May of 2020 and said it was going to not yet it's not going to start being a part of the algorithm until, or they said early 2021 at the time. And so we were like, well, is that January? Is that February? What are we talking about here? But to sort of get all of us web folks and marketing folks, kind of more data so that we could measure these things that were going to become ranking factors, they started to incorporate the Web Vitals in some of their tools. So you can, mainly in the Search Console. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of get a sense for where things are.
Yeah, and we ended up, the news about this changed over time over the course of the year, but the core message remains the same, which is that Google is paying attention to the experience of people visiting a website. They have used the masses of data that they've got to make a decision about what makes for a good web experience, and they are going to enforce that through search rank. So the thing to do is to make sure that you are in the green level for each of these rankings using the tools that they've made available. And they've made more tools available through the year. So I mean, I guess if they're going to make things challenging for us, it's nice that they're giving us something to play with.
Yeah, and they did give us a lot of lead time. So we did learn sort of recently in the last couple of months, I think, last couple of weeks, that these vitals, these statistics were going to start impacting rankings starting in May 2021. So we have 5 months from now, essentially, to make changes if we need to make changes for our sites to get them from wherever they are today into that sort of green zone. Mm-hmm. So
one of the other that like first week of January thing that we were sort of worried about.
We didn't know what early 2021. That's hard to say. 2021. Yeah. It's a mouthful. We got to get used to saying it. But we also covered later on in the year relating to this, but if you wanted to see where your website was falling on these things and you didn't have Google Search Console, well, you should get it. That would be my pro tip there. It's free. You should set that up. But if you don't, you use Chrome as a browser, they have a nifty little tool called Lighthouse. And it allows you to do a little test and see where you're at with these Google core websites. So you go to inspect, and there's a number of different options, but you want to sort of scroll over to Lighthouse. And then there you're confronted with some choices. Would you like to see your score, your Google, your performance score based on mobile, or would you like to look at desktop? Would you like to look at these various categories? And so you can kind of make choices. The more you have checked off, the longer it will take for Lighthouse to do its thing. And this is going by this page that you're on. It's not your whole site, it's page by page. And that's really important, I think, because a lot of folks don't realize that the way that ranking works is your website on the whole does not achieve spot number 2. It's a page on your website which maybe achieves spot number 2 on the search engine results page. And you have different things on each page. Maybe one page you have a bunch of photos, maybe another page you just have text, another page you have videos. Well, that's going to impact the performance of that particular page. So you do need to look page by page.
We decided we would pick on Apple, and we're doing that again here, because we figure they can handle it. Yeah, I'm still gonna buy their products. But so you can see they're not doing so great on performance on mobile, but some other things they do really well. So if this was the situation for your website, you'd know, okay, I need to focus on this area and bring it up to at least yellow, if not green.
Yeah. And then that gets into a lot of details that we don't need to cover today, but just
go back and watch that episode from June 12th and see all the things that we highlighted for you and some ideas about what's important to focus on.
Good idea. And then what was our next one? I have to scroll back up here.
The next one we were talking about was the June 19th episode, when we were looking at the art of persuasion, if you will. So we were talking about different kinds of direct marketing, and then how to measure the success of a campaign, but also like when you think about, we have all these techniques and things for campaigns, but like, how do you make people, how do you persuade someone? Not so much make someone, but how do you communicate in a way that creates action or creates or changes opinions? And I think this was important to us in June. I think it's been something that everybody's been thinking about all year, and whether you're in marketing or not, thinking about the election, thinking about talking about the guidelines about COVID. How do you persuade someone that it's worth it to go to all this trouble? All of these things. So
right, like what in general, what influences behavior change? And like it or not, brands influence the way we behave, and especially through advertising. And that definitely, we talked a lot throughout the year about how different ad campaigns were evolving during COVID. And, there was some things that were changing because they had to. You couldn't do live shoots. So there you were seeing a different kind of shot and a different kind of ad being rolled out that was less polished, or maybe not less polished for all, but a different sort of editing capabilities, because you weren't all on scene and on location and able to do all the things. But nonetheless, the sort of what we wanted to kind of highlight in this episode was, well, we ourselves do a lot of different, public awareness campaigns and lead generation campaigns, and what works, what are the things that work in these types of campaigns? Is it facts? Is it stories? Is it some combination of those things? What makes people say, oh, I do want to buy that thing, or I love that brand.
Right. And so much of it really, because it really comes down to like, what do we as humans need in life, and then how do you appeal to those things that people really need? And so much of what humans need is social reinforcement or approval or being part of a group. And so appeals that somehow tie to some of those things can be more persuasive even than something like fear, or because we certainly do fear being ostracized, or being less than, or being made fun of. All of those things are things that cause challenges. But this idea of social connection, which is why influencers become important. That's why they work, and celebrity, and so on, as well as personal appeals or recommendations by friends or people that you know.
Yeah, and I think that I'm not major in psychology or anything like that, but we are as humans sort of hardwired to seek out a herd, a community. And once you have that community, you kind of act as one unit and you make decisions together. And then that, like, everything that community or that herd does behaves or impacts individual behavior. So it's just, if you think about a social influencer, they've created a following on, say, Instagram, and they have however many, sort of followers, and those followers are looking to that one leader inside of the herd to, what should I buy this Christmas? And, what should I wear right now? And, what sorts of dance moves are popular? What songs are you listening to? All of those things are oftentimes influenced by people inside of the herd.
Right. What else did we want to feature? What other episodes did we find interesting this past summer?
Well, I think the next one on the list was one of my favorites, which took place also in summer, July 17th. We talked about homepage sliders.
Oh, yes, right. And we had a little bit of a debate, as I recall, a little bit of an artificial debate with me being pro slider and you being anti slider.
Yes. And in reality, we're both anti-slider.
Right. But I think one can be a really good advocate for the opposite. You know what I mean? Because then the little holes in your own theories. So I hope that it was still a good discussion.
Sure. But, I just wanted to do spoiler alert.
Yeah, right. So, and in the end, spoiler alert, maybe, block your ears if you haven't yet watched this episode and want to see how it plays out. But
right.
What did we decide in the end?
Well, in the end, we decided it was not a good idea to have the homepage slider anymore. And in large part, there's two really big reasons, but in large part because the mobile experience of a slider is not great. It's never going to be great. I shouldn't say never. It's hard for it to be done well in a mobile experience. And so, we know we have to design mobile first. We just talked about that. It's where people are starting their searches, entering their searches, making purchases. Everything's happening on that device. So there's really no place for a homepage slider on an iPhone or a Samsung or a whatever device you use.
It's just not going to be terribly effective. It's not great. There's no hovering, there's only tapping. So a lot of the mechanisms that kind of make them work a little bit on a desktop just don't work. But also people don't have that kind of time. They're not going to sit there and look through your slideshow. They want to move. They're moving on.
Right, exactly. And that's the other thing is, like, behavior wise, I understand what goes behind wanting a homepage slider, especially for like nonprofit organization that has things that change and evolve throughout the year. And they have one slider they really, really like that's important that gets people to donate. And then they have 3 other ones that are event-based or, some sort of timely seasonal thing. And they want all of them. They really can't make a choice of what should be featured on the very top spot. It's just very hard for I don't mean to pick on nonprofit organizations, but it's just the ones we see most often. It's just hard for them to figure it out.
And yet the process of choosing, like, what are we going to focus on right now? It can actually be really clarifying. It can help you focus other resources, create cohesive campaigns and outreach, and keep a big thing that I think for any website, not just nonprofits, but for anybody, by not having this sort of rotating slides, but still wanting there to be some life to your page, it pushes you to think about, like, what's the interaction you want people to have, and also to think about how your priorities change and how often you should be updating that website. So, take a look at sites that build that in, like an Amazon that builds in change to the site through certain algorithmic things, but also sort of processes to make that site always interesting and always different. Or an Apple, which every month or every week is changing up which products it's featuring or which campaigns and messages it's going to highlight.
Right. And I don't know if we said this during our episode, but one, if you are a business or an organization that has a slider currently, and you fear that there's not going to be consensus around changing it, we would recommend always going to the data. So if you've got a Google Analytics installed and you've been tracking behavior of users on the site, we know just sort of anecdotally across multiple of our clients that people aren't clicking on those homepage sliders. In fact, they just go right by them and ignore them, and they're just not getting the click through that you would hope that they would get. So if you need some, data and some evidence to sort of prove this is not working, grab that from Google Analytics or whatever website, analytics tool that you're using.
Exactly. Always rely on the data.
Yes. Cool. So the next thing we wanted to highlight was August 14th. We had a special guest. I think she might have been our first special guest, Ruby, our graphic designer, came on. And she talked to us and the folks watching about designing for dark mode.
And by dark mode, we mean this new sort of, not new, but a thing that's being built into more and more interfaces where you can choose, do you want your phone screen, like the built-in elements, to be dark or light? Do you want to mostly see like white text in a dark background or dark text in a white background? And there's, reasons to choose either one. Certain people want that just because it hits their eyes better or is aesthetically more pleasing to them. And others choose it because of accessibility pieces. So either one, they can be, but the point is they're both there in more and more places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think some of your apps right now, depending on how you have your settings, at a certain time they'll go dark mode. Like I know everything on my phone, I have it switching to dark mode at night so that those, the light that's emanating from the phone doesn't keep me up longer than it needs to, that bright white light. And so it's really kind of, a design thing that helps quality of life.
Right. And so we had Ruby on as our graphic designer because when you're in dark mode, you need to, knowing that some people will be in dark mode, some people are in light mode, there's little tools and techniques you can do in creating your graphics and in designing your interface to be able to be equally attractive and work very well no matter what's going on. And if you pretend that it doesn't exist, well, your dark text might not be visible or your graphic may appear differently than you want, or things have little halos around them because of dithering that's going on. And so it can just all look like crap. And it's nice to not have the things that you put your attention to not look like crap.
Well, yeah, of course. And it's just another thing that as designers and developers of things that go onto the web, it's just another thing you kind of have to pay attention to when you're designing something. So you have to consider the mobile experience. You have to consider this as well, because you can't control how users are. It's their choice to go into dark mode, so you don't know. So you have to assume that some portion of people are seeing your work and your art in this way. So you need to plan for that. So we talked about that. Ruby talked about that.
Ruby talked about that. And then our next special guest was in September 4th.
We
were talking about campaigns in Google search.
Yes. Was that our next special guest, or did I get it wrong?
Well, I think so. We had Ruby, and then we had Kelly on September 4th. I don't think we had any guests in between them.
Okay. No, you're right. I just didn't see her name on there. Usually we'd have an intro, like, "Hey, here's Kelly." Kelly is our digital marketing manager, and so she came on this episode and we talked all about Google search, sort of like a primer, if you will.
Right. All the basics of it, but because of how we are, we also went kind of in deep. So we went both broad and deep.
Yes, why not? So there's something for everyone.
Mhm.
Yes. Well,
And I think Kelly did,
oh god.
she did like a great job of looking at, how we structure campaigns, what kinds of campaigns there are, whether it's lead generation or awareness raising. So we raised a whole bunch of different things, talked a little bit about how these online ads, how their bidding works, this idea of bidding automatically and setting things. So there's just a lot of things there that if you're just getting into it, or you've been kind of finding your way through, but maybe want to refresh your memory on things, I think that's a great episode to watch. We had a number of different references and things to look at.
Yeah, we talked a lot about like how you structure a campaign, because before you even get into the actual interface of Google Ads, you have to know a lot of information, and a lot of strategy work has to be done before you build that campaign. So we talked a little bit about that, and the types of things that you should be considering. And I think as you mentioned, Cynthia, a Google Ads campaign can be about generating a pure brand awareness. It can be about generating leads, or it could be a combination of both, where you perhaps start the brand awareness campaign first to sort of lay the groundwork, and then you kick in your search campaign to generate leads after you've done that, to help have a better performance. So we talked a lot about that.
Yeah. And then I think we ended up looking at some best practices and other things that were sort of interesting across the different ads. So definitely well worth checking out.
Absolutely. And then on September 18th, we talked about some copywriting best practices. And I think that this is not the only time that we talked about copywriting. Certainly it's a part of any time that we're talking about design. We're also talking about, there's copy involved typically as well. So we talked a little bit about some of those best practices and how you can prepare yourself to do good things in copywriting.
And in particular, looking at best practices, we went and what I thought was kind of enjoyable about it was looked at a blog post by a professional copy writer who was talking about her own sort of personal experience in trying to sell a couch on Craigslist. And it was, number one, as a good copywriter, of course, she writes a good post, but also there were some very real things in there. She talked about, basically using this experience of selling this couch on Craigslist to think about different elements, like what words to use, what kinds of things to include, the kind of things where, when you see like a real estate ad, for example, people are talking, there's certain keywords that people look at. And apparently if you're trying to sell a couch, you don't want to just describe it as gently used and free, but you want to actually charge a little bit of money, say that you're sad to see them go, add some emotion to it, and then rich caramel hue, and call them deep and comfortable, and really highlight different things that are going to trigger stuff. So I think this is first of all, just a fun blog post to read. But second, this checklist is useful for, make your first draft, but then go back and kind of go through these things. How can you tweak? How can you punch it up? How can you make it a more appealing article? So again, this is Anne Handley, and the links to all these things are in the September 18th blog video.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the other thing to kind of highlight, or that this story highlights for me, is that everything's a search engine. And so as you kind of brought up with that real estate example, I love to look at houses. I just love it. So I have a number of different apps that I have on my phone that I can go and search, houses. And I do read that description, and it's not necessarily how I'm filtering my data, but I read it and it makes an impression on me. And so there's that. You should always be thinking about, from a copywriting standpoint, does this, give the reader the feeling I want them to feel, or the impression that I want them to walk away with, and really thinking about the user, of course. But everything's a search engine. If you're posting something in Craigslist, if you're posting something in Facebook, if you're posting something in LinkedIn, they all have their own internal search engines, so that they can, just like a search engine like Google, can serve up content based on somebody's search query and give them satisfying results. So you have to always be thinking of that.
Precisely.
What did we talk about
There's
next?
a lot of stuff when you do 27 episodes of a thing. So this is the 27th one right now. So we've done 26 that we're reviewing.
Correct. Yeah. So the next one on the list is our episode from October 9th. And we talked about chatbots.
Oh, yes. Well, we had some just particular experiences with chatbots. Of course, everybody knows there are those, when you go to a website, a little thing pops up, usually in the lower right, that says, "Hi, I notice you're here. Can I help you?" Like it's meant to be some sort of a concierge to the site, or something to try and create an interaction and kind of hook you in. Or in other cases, it can be there to help you solve your problem, maybe answer a question, or act as a sort of a triage for your troubleshooting a problem that you've got and making sure you go to the right place.
Yeah, and in some cases it can be there is a human behind it answering questions in emergent situations, and so you've got lots of ways to contact and reach people, but sometimes you're already on their website, so you don't have to click, to get your phone out and call. You don't have to do something else. You can just interact right then and get help right away.
And it's worth mentioning that as we were thinking about this and thinking about this idea of sort of online action, it's kind of a flashback to the original, problem-solving chatbot, which was Microsoft's Clippy. This both beloved and well-hated virtual assistant that was built into the different. I don't remember what version of the Microsoft Windows thing it came up in, but it was like in all the apps. It was always coming up, had these crazy eyes,
googly eyes,
and then became sort of a meme that including actually showing up in some of the Microsoft yearly reports and product debuts.
Fun. All right, what else did we talk about? So I think next on the list is from October 16th, and we talked about the cookieless future that is in sort of impending on us, and which is really just changes in how cookies, which are sort of little tracking devices that go onto a website, how they're changing and how the rules around them are changing, and what that might mean for you as a business owner, what that might mean for you as an individual user of the web. You're probably seeing these all over the place, multiple times per day as you travel the web, which is these little notes that say, hey, this website uses cookies to track your behavior so that we can serve up an experience to you that is a little bit more customized and tailored to who you are and what you care about. Do you accept?
Even this article that we're on here that's explaining cookies has a cookie thing at the bottom and offers you the ability to have more info on it, telling you their privacy policy. But interestingly enough, not giving the option to not have the cookies.
Right.
They're just letting you know they're there, and all you can do is
well, I feel like the rules aren't necessarily there's suggestions in the case of the US. In the case of Europe, there are rules, hard and fast, clear rules. But with the US, I think that it's California has some rules, but it's just more of a suggestion at this point. I don't know if I'm right about that, but it feels like some sites are, because it's being handled in so many different ways. I imagine that there's not you have to do it this way yet.
Well, I think the regulations are trying to be clear, But one does, I mean, companies do need time to adapt to new regulations anytime. So that's one part of it. And the second is thinking about, okay, what does any particular company want to do? And so I know there's a lot of companies, there are certain companies who are like, oh yeah, you're right, we shouldn't be collecting information on people. Maybe the engineers or other people within the company, want to, they have other things outside of the, business goals about, what's an appropriate way to be a good net citizen. So, and as with anything legal, then, these things have to kind of play their way through. So it continues to be a moving landscape, if you will.
Right.
So more like the ocean than in like solid ground.
Yeah. But I think, just in terms of an awareness level, we've been paying a lot of attention to it, and, looking at the different ways that people are executing and implementing these accept cookie pop-ups, and how they're phrasing it, and, just how some people are getting really creative with it and having it be, not just this formal, I have to put this here, but they're, more integrating it into the experience and making it align with their brand a little bit more, which I find to be fun. And then that sort of is an endearing quality and makes me maybe like, oh, this is a cool, website. This is a cool brand. So
yeah, it's always, as with anything, it's always an opportunity to extend your brand. And then for as a person who is in many ways responsible for having those cookies exist there or wanting to use the information from them, it's it behooves us to like really think through how, if we can't, so cookies, in addition to helping people sort of see where learn about people and where they visited on the web, which is the privacy part that people tend to be most concerned about. Like they can see which websites you've gone to, they can gather information about you, and then with enough data, they can paint a picture of you that can be startlingly clear and accurate, even if it is in some way anonymized. It can actually be tracked down a lot. But how can we use that information responsibly to advertise or to market and convey things to people who we think truly honestly would like to know? Like we don't advertise to annoy people, we advertise to hopefully help them find out things that would be of value to them. Here's a summer camp that your kid might really enjoy and you might be glad to send them to. How else are we going to get that out to them?
Well, yeah, I mean, as advertisers, that represent clients, I don't want to spend their money on people that aren't likely to want their product. It's not, it's just like throwing money right out the window. So you really want to be able to show ads and show things to people that are likely going to convert, that want that thing. So everyone, it's a win-win-win situation. It's a win for us, win for the client, it's a win for the customer. So yeah, and I think that we're sort of just more sort of philosophically living in an era where you do need to opt in more than opt out. It's kind of like it used to be like, we'll just send stuff to all these people and they don't want it, they can opt out. It's like, well, let's just, be a little bit more thoughtful of how we approach this and, let them opt into some of these messages as opposed to just unsubscribe.
Right. And another important role of cookies is being able to measure the success or effectiveness of things that you're doing, whether it's like, how well is the stuff on my website written, or how well crafted was my campaign? Is it reaching the right people? And are they then turning into customers? What are the steps along the way? What do people want to know before they make a sale? And so that measurement is another critical function of cookies. And again, people can have privacy concerns about it and maybe not want to be tracked so carefully. But again, as a business person, I'm trying to make sure that money is being spent well, and the data is the only thing I've got to know the answer to that.
To prove it, yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. I think, and we talked a lot about different types of cookies. The ones that are experiencing the most changes are the third-party cookies. So, let's just say Shift Collaborative's website, we have some cookies on there that are first-party cookies that we use to track, where visitors came from and where they go to on the site. We're not using that we're not giving that information to anybody else. We don't know who, it's anonymized. So we don't know who you are, but we have some information about where you came from and what you did once you were on our site. that's not really going away. We might have to start telling you we do that. That is a thing that could be changing for first party cookies. But the third party ones where someone else plops something on your website so they can track the behavior of your users and your visitors, that's what's changing, and where there's a lot of restrictions and tightening up kind of happening.
Mm-hmm. And tied to things like big advertising networks like a Facebook, which want to, by way of saying, hey, was your Facebook campaign effective, they're also gathering a whole bunch of other information. So that feels a little bit like
yeah, but that isn't that first, like inside of their own platform, what they track is first party.
Yeah, but so if I, if I'm like running a Facebook campaign, and so I've got a tracking pixel on my website to say how many people went through and completed it.
Yeah.
That's a third party one. And then Facebook is using that data partly to tell me, hey, did my campaign work? But it's also partly like, and by the way, I'm going to store all this information over here and use it in my own nefarious ways.
Right. Yep. We I don't think I pulled this out as a highlight, but we talked a lot about Facebook this year on various episodes. The boycott, all sorts of things were brought up about Facebook and its changes and woes.
And I think that looking into 2021, it will continue to be a major area. I mean, we didn't even talk at all about this ad campaign that Facebook has been running, trying to say, hey, we're not the worst people. Apple's bad too. That they're running on the New York Times. This massive banner takes up like half of my screen when I go to the New York Times. It's saying, this is what Facebook is about. These are our privacy ideas, and then putting all these little daggers on everybody else. It's I think we're about, they're a tiny little news moment. I think we're about to see a whole bunch of like, look at that guy going on.
Yeah, that's what we need more of. We need more of that. We need more conflict and strife and, back and forth between entities that we don't need to interact with each other.
Yeah.
No. Great. Super. All right. And then moving on. On November 13th, we talked about another topic that comes up a lot in our work, and we build websites at Shift Collaborative for our clients. And not only do we build them, but we maintain them and help our clients keep them healthy and keep them fresh. So we talked on November 13th about the shelf life of a website. Like how long does your website last? You've given it perhaps you've gone through a complete overhaul in a certain year, or you maybe just lightly refreshed it, whatever the case may be. How long does that investment stick?
Right. And I think there's so many different factors. And so that's why we had the whole episode kind of talking about technology pieces of it, content elements, even your brand and style, and just the changing world around you. So what we're thinking, you've got a plan to be doing stuff with your website all the time. So it's kind of what it comes down to.
Right. For all the things that we talked about this dark mode today. We talked about, mobile, having a really modern, mobile-y friendly website. You have to pay attention to all of these things on a regular basis. You can't ignore it, because your site will look dated and it'll be a bad experience. And then now, in May, you're going to get dinged from a ranking perspective, most likely, if you haven't been paying attention to your site. And so it's all bad stuff. Got to pay attention.
So sort of, it's kind of like a car, minor sort of overhaul, small regular maintenance all the time. Maybe some large things every couple of years, and then you can rejigger the whole thing every 5 years or somewhere like that.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, how we our moral of our story of a shelf life is like, if you're paying attention and you're, if you're maintaining all the aspects of your website, and you're updating the content, and you're making sure that, you're sort of staying on top of things all the time, like on a monthly basis, then you can have a longer shelf life for your website. But if you're not doing these things, then it's going to go downhill a lot faster. So if you're not going to invest in ongoing maintenance and content updates and whatnot, your shelf life is maybe perhaps 2 years, 2 or 3 years. And if you are doing the right things, then maybe it's more like 5 to 7 years. Just depends.
Yes. So that was November, mid-November that we did that.
Yeah.
Well into our library, I guess now, of these videos. And then the next week we had a great another, I think our last special guest for 2020, who was Dorit, who is an SEO specialist, really talking about we had talked, I think, at different points about different aspects of search engine optimization, but she gave a really great overview of the beginning to end, and then the ongoingness of doing keyword research and really doing a great SEO project on a site.
Right. And it was a lot about content strategy and how should you, how do you even start working on SEO for your website? Where are the places to start? And we did talk, as you say, a lot about keyword research and, what kinds of content you develop have a lot to do with what search engines are going to be looking for, but that goes to the user. What are users looking for? And what can you offer them that meets their needs?
She's such a big advocate of the buyer persona and coming up with target profiles and really thinking about the key audience or audiences of a website, really understanding those individuals as best you can so that you're seeing the site in their eyes and thinking about the key searches in their minds, like what do they specifically want, not just what terminology to use. So that buyer persona thing, which we use across all of our marketing efforts, I'm not sure that I have always put as much of attention to it in an SEO context as she's recommending as a best practice, which is a great advice.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, all things SEO we talked about and had a nice chat with Dorit. And then on December 4th, we talked about more of a design thing. So kind of, trends in design, specifically around, what we're seeing for logo designs, but also just in general, some good principles when it comes to designing things. So we talked about, I guess it's going to be the 2021 trends, but obviously they're based on 2020 and what's happening there. And so we talked about the 3 trends that Adweek is saying are going to be a thing in 2021.
Yes, these much beloved, well appreciated design changes for Google. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. So design changes moving toward more of a simplistic geometric kind of a look, and Google's icons tapping into that. So simplistic geometry being one, more modern symbolism. And when we say modern, I think there's a big part of this that is recognizing all of the audiences, taking into account different marginalized communities, really thinking about all the communities and not using things like the two big examples we talked about were Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben's rice, and how those 2 brands and the companies that own them, they had to do a real reckoning. Once seeing the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter movement, really thinking about what is our brand that we've come to build a bunch of meaning around it, but what are other meanings that other people are feeling that we have ignored? Right.
So yeah, a lot of really big changes in 2020 with brands paying attention to really important things, and probably should have been paying attention to them earlier than 2020, but 2020 was the year that that kind of made them perk up and say, okay, now's the time to make these really important changes that we, I think some of them recognize that it had been too long.
Yeah. Well, certainly when you think about some of the brands like in sports, the Washington football team, the Cleveland baseball team, those people have been saying for some time, hey, your team names are racist. Your team names are
offensive to me personally,
offensive,
not me,
and
but
minimizing
groups of people.
And so there have been large pushes, but this is the year that enough of a wave has come along to really cause a reckoning.
Right. So we talked about a lot of stuff. in our 26 episodes. Was there any that was a particular favorite of yours?
I've always enjoyed the things where we can bring in our different experiences and tie pieces together. I liked talking about the writing piece, the copywriting, because it reminded me of other ads. And when you think about something that you remember so well, an ad that you remember really well, it's often great writing and design that comes in. So when we get to cross-reference those things and pull in all the connections, those are my favorites. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. I'm like, I don't mean to just agree with you, not have my own thing, but one of my favorite things was sort of dissecting some of the ads that are running, and and all the pieces and components of the ad that you see on the screen, but also kind of what's happening in the background. We've shot commercials before and been a part of that process, so it's always interesting to wonder how, I think, people outside of the advertising industry maybe don't think about this as much as we do, but I think they still think about it like, why did they make that choice? Why did they say those words? Why did they do those things? And, it's just, I don't know, it's just really sort of interesting and entertaining to pick apart those things, those ads. And I think it was also, I feel good about our conversations around how marketing and advertising and communication have changed during this pandemic, and what we were seeing and the changes, good and bad, happening in our industry during this pandemic, and really being able to have a platform through these weekly episodes to talk about that stuff. It's been good.
Yeah, part of what's fun about our business is we get to try so many new things, and to me, I think that's part of what's going to be exciting about what's been good about 2020. That when we needed to, we were able to try some new things and find some new ways to communicate and to put together, hopefully, some useful tools and resources. And then going forward into 2021, I'm excited to try some other new things and see what, as our world evolves around us and as we evolve with it, how we can create things that are useful, interesting, fun for us, fun for other people, and maybe continue to come up with new and effective ways to communicate.
Yes, well, I am excited to see what 2021 holds for sure. And, we might be going off the air for a while with office hours, but that doesn't mean we're going anywhere. So if you are watching the highlight reels here, and you want to reach out and ask us any questions, we're going to we have an email address dedicated to office hours, and that's not going anywhere. So if you have any questions at any time, you can email us at officehours at shiftcollaborative.com, and we will certainly answer any questions that you send our way.
Right. And I think I'm also interested in what people, what are useful forms to people. Most people that will answer this are people who like video, but do you like video? If you don't like video, what are useful things? Like, when you have to look something up, Sarah, what kind of tools do you gravitate to?
Like learn a thing or just find out information?
Let's say you're stuck with a problem and you're trying to think about it differently. What might you research there?
Yeah, so I would probably read articles on the topic, perhaps, and because then you get a couple of different points of view. When I'm going to learn a thing, I'll just give a really specific example. I wanted to tie one of those big holiday bows that have multiple things, and I probably, God bless you, probably watched, I don't know, 50 YouTube videos, and then I ended up going out buying this thing called Bow Cadabra. Abacadabra, because I still kind of anyway, videos are helpful for certain to visually learn a thing, and articles are more my jam to cross-reference stuff.
There's a skimmability that articles offer that for me I appreciate, and then there's other times where I have read Julia Child's cookbooks back to front. They're long, but they're good. But then I also watch her, I've watched her shows, and I watched, same with Jacques Pepin, another PBS chef. I enjoy his cookbooks. He describes things well, but he currently still does these great little short things that are on YouTube and on Facebook. And it's like, oh, that's how you're supposed to cook a French omelet. Like seeing it live makes all the difference. So it really does depend on the situation. And it's nice to have a mix of those things so that you can go and look back at it and see the visuals. And we all learn in so many different ways.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about our world right now, that all of that is at your fingertips as long as you have an internet connection. You can get everything practically that you need from an education standpoint. I just watched Jacques, is it Jacques or Jean, his green bean situation.
Oh yeah, he does a green beans one. Yep, that's a good one. I watched him and Julia Child do a show on vegetables and vegetable stews, and part of why I like watching them, this is when Julia was much more older, but little things like, oh, are you going to do that now?
That's how you're doing now?
As these two expert chefs, both are very respectful of each other, but also a little bit like, This is my favorite.
See how that turns out. Yes. Well, it's the end of our hour, and the last episode of 2020. So we just want to thank everybody for being a part of this, and we hope that you got as much out of it as we did.
Yeah. Please let us know anything that we can help you with, and more importantly, as the year ends, stay warm, stay safe, stay well, and we hope to see you again really early on in the 2021 year.
That's right. Right.